What's up, everyone? Online prep coach Alex Cook here at thepepcoach.com. Today, back with another basics biology seminar series. This one looking at really understanding the growth hormone-based system to understand growth hormone peptides. I feel, again, understanding the basics is so important to understand proper implementation and utilization of all these compounds, especially with growth hormone. So we're going to look at the basics with growth hormone utilization and really look at endogenous production first and foremost, right? Now, we are going to have, first of all, like usual, we're starting off in the hypothalamus, kind of similar to where we started off in the last basics video, right? Start off in the hypothalamus, only here we're looking at the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. So this is actually going to release growth hormone, releasing hormone, which you've heard about in peptide format, right? So we have this growth hormone, releasing hormone. It's going to go what's through the hypophyseal portal system. So hypophyseal portal system, which is basically like the vascular tissue and kind of like a causeway between the hypothalamus and the actual anterior pituitary. Now in the anterior pituitary, it's interacting with somatotropes, right? So when I say the word somatropic, referring to somatropes, referring to growth hormone. Makes sense, right? So we have somatotropes in the anterior pituitary. So I'll do like a little like this, so it kind of denotes where we're at. Then we see this cool release of what we're talking about today, which is growth hormone. Now, growth hormone can bifurcate, trifurcate, go in a bunch of different directions. The main one we're going to focus on here is the interaction in hepatic tissue. So we're going through, this is mainly looking at our hepatic, so liver interaction. And in the liver, we see it binding with what is, it is a tyrosine-like kinase receptor. So we're seeing it binding to that receptor and causing the initial cascade you've heard of, JAK. So the JAK-STAT cascade starts here. That's Janus kinase. Originally, it was called just another kinase, as funny enough as that is. Then they named it something more cooler. JAK sounds pretty cool, right? Janus kinase. Janus kinase is going to go ahead. It's going to add phosphates to STAT, which is going to begin the whole downstream cascade. And I'm going to I'll put it over here, just so we don't kind of run out of room down here. But then STAT starts going through the whole process, actually interacting in the actual genes. So looking at epigenetic expression, what we're seeing here is DNA changes. So we have the process of transcription, which after things are transcripted, then things have to be actually translated. And then we eventually spit out a new protein. So this protein could be IGF-1, could be multiple things. I think that's one of the biggest points to pull it out right here, right? Everyone talks about IGF-1. And when we get lab work done to check the effectiveness of our growth hormone or growth hormone peptides, we check IGF-1. If it went up, then we think our product was good, right? If it didn't go up or went down, even if we see biofeedback changes, then we're questioning things. The problem with this is the proteins that can be spit out here from the liver can be IGF-1, right? Or it could literally be about 10,000 other different types of growth factors. So right out of the gate, you can look at vascular endothelial growth factor. You can look at a growth factor in every different system in the body, and those could be why you might get your IGF-1 tested after taking X, Y, or Z peptide and see IGF didn't change or it went down, but yet your hair grew, your skin improved, your sleep improved, all these things improved, you lost fat, you built muscle tissue, you had all the positive changes, but the number didn't change. So number one, why learning basic biology matters is because knowing that cascade means when you test your blood work, so learning lesson number one is when you test your blood work, IGF-1 is not the end all be all. So it's a good way to correlate if you're a good or poor responder if you're also correlating that with positive or negative side effects, because side effects can be positive or negative. So we're trying to bring biofeedback and then correlate to blood work, never doing blood work and then correlating to biofeedback. So I hope that makes sense. That's the rough cascade of how things are working. Now, what's cool here is if we look at the peptide world, right? We have these different things going on. We have, I'll put them right here. So we have growth hormone, releasing hormone, and then we have growth hormone releasing peptides. Now, if you guys are familiar, and I want to give credit where credit's due, back in the day, Dat B True, it was D-A-T-B-T-R-U-E, or no E at the end, just T-R-U. He was the original poster online who literally came out with all of the original GHRP and GHRH research. He was the guy who was actually selling the first growth hormone peptides and really made them big. Talked about the actual biochemistry involved with combining them. Fast forward a little bit, and he got into trouble with the law because at this time there was a lot of stuff going on in the background, but he was the one who popularized and deserves all the credit in the world for bringing growth hormone peptides to the market. Now, sadly, he had also taught a good amount of people at that time, and one individual in particular, which I'm not about drama, so I'm not going to say his name, but he's a big name in the industries now in the longevity peptide community. He actually took all of that research and pushed it off as his own. So I only bring that up not to start drama. I bring that up to show you guys where the past was with these things. So all of this stuff was talked about decades and decades ago. And then people began to recycle that information, not talking about anything new, but just basically took what he said. And so I'm only bringing that up to give more credit to Dat Be True. He was a true pioneer. I'm not sure what he's doing now or if he's even alive, but he deserves so much credit for this. So want to give credit where credit's due, no drama, just the reality. But looking at this, now this is the interesting part. Growth hormone releasing hormone, where does it interact? It actually interacts with the hypothalamus, but it also interacts with the anterior pituitary. Growth hormone releasing peptides interact in the hypothalamus and also interact with the anterior pituitary. So where's the difference, right? Where's the difference? What's going on here? Well, even though the interaction globally in terms of law of locality is the same, the difference and the biggest difference here is the growth hormone releasing peptides are interacting with ghrelin receptors. So these are going to mainly be your GHRSs, also known as your growth hormone secretagogue. All right, I did that wrong. Growth hormone secretagogue. Your growth hormone secretagogue receptors. Again, also known as ghrelin. So that's really the big key difference between growth hormone releasing hormones not interacting with ghrelin receptors and GHRPs interacting with ghrelin receptors. Now, also we have to look at is the degree of stimulation. So if we look at growth hormone releasing hormone, they tend to have a greater stimulus on the hypothalamus and on the anterior pituitary. So they're hitting that sucker, those suckers, pretty dang hard chemically speaking. Whereas growth hormone releasing peptides, they're hitting them, but they're not hitting them chemically as strong. But they're also, because the strength isn't as high, we are seeing interaction at the growth hormone secretagogue receptor, so ghrelin receptor, and we are also seeing them even furthermore down-regulating, I'm going to put soma, somatostatin. Somatostatin is the thing that will come as a negative feedback loop and shut off endogenous production. So when you're taking exogenous growth hormone, that doesn't matter. It overrides and bypasses somatostatin. When you're taking a growth hormone peptide like these, if you are not, because somatostatin can be peaked at any time, it can rise and fall. But if you're not managing somatostatin, you could be taking your growth hormone releasing hormone at a time whenever somatostatin's high and get less efficacy. It's never, I know it's talked about to like completely abolish and blunt and waste your growth hormone peptides. It's not that simple. It's a degree of suppression, not complete suppression. But we want the full action out of our peptides. And so that's why, excuse me, the best combination is to combine both of these. Because what do we get? If we combine them, we have the growth hormone releasing hormone actually doing the releasing of this entire cascade of growth hormone releasing hormone to get us growth hormone. But we also have the improved, I'm going to say, signal. So the growth hormone releasing peptides actually improve the pulse. So if we have releasing and having a high strength of pulse, this improves the strength of the pulse and the duration. So I'm saying improvement in signaling, but it's doing everything. It's complementing and potentiating everything that your growth hormone releasing hormone's doing. So that's why usually they're combined, but not all the time for different reasons and purposes, which we'll talk about. So if we kind of bring these down here, we have our basic list. We're not going to go through all of them because there's a lot. We'll go growth hormone releasing hormones, and then we'll have our growth hormone releasing peptides, and then we're going to have our secretagogues. So classic traditional growth hormone releasing hormones are going to be CJC 1295, tesamorelin, and sermorelin. Now, then we go over to GHRPs. In GHRPs, we're seeing ipamorelin. We are seeing the older school GHRP2 and 6. And we're also going to see our hexarelin. Now, in the secretagogue family, we're really not looking at the growth hormone secretagogue, meaning the ghrelin receptor, as being the secretagogues. When we say secretagogues, we're talking about something that releases continuous pulses of growth hormone every single hour, not every single minute, but it continuously just pumps out a ton. So in this secretagogue category, we're really looking at MK-677. We'll talk very briefly about MK-777. And technically, I'm going to put CJC with DAC over here. So I say CJC with DAC with the understanding that this is no DAC. Technically, though, this is still a growth hormone releasing hormone, but because of how it works, I don't think it really gets classified as just a hormone. It more works kinetically like a secretagogue. So if we're looking at all these, okay, CJC 1295 without DAC, comparing it to something like a tesamorelin, comparing it to something like a sermorelin, CJC 1295 kind of always works. There's very few people that respond poorly to it. Same thing with tesamorelin. They both tend to work very well. You'll read research that says tesamorelin's better at pulling off visceral body fat from the gut. CJC might be better at building more muscle tissue. In reality, the application between these two is fairly similar. It more comes down to the individual. So my prime two options, if I'm going with the growth hormone releasing hormone, is going to be either CJC without DAC or tesamorelin. Now, the difference between tesamorelin and sermorelin. So sermorelin is technically the natural, right? They say that is the natural, less synthetic version, whereas tesamorelin is chemically more modified. They say it gives you a more natural pulse, and in reality, I don't really see that to be the case. I very rarely use sermorelin personally with a lot of people because I see that much better results with fat loss, with muscle gain, with articular cartilage growth, with like everything from the other two. So personally for me, growth hormone releasing hormone-wise, sermorelin is not really something I utilize in my practice as a coach, not a doctor obviously, because it just doesn't have the same efficacy as its two brothers up here. Now we'll go to GHRP. So growth hormone releasing peptides, ipamorelin, growth hormone releasing peptide 2 and 6, then hexarelin. So to me, hexarelin almost isn't in this category because it's not similar at all. But first we're going with IPAM. If we were comparing ipamorelin to GHRP 2 and 6, what are the biggest difference? Ipamorelin has very little change on the prolactin side of things, very little change on the excessive fluid retention, and very little change on the hunger aspect. All of these, because they stimulate growth hormone production, can drive hunger in certain ways. But I don't see ipamorelin as being, they say, not the sloppy one. And that's kind of a good way to talk about it. So if you're looking for if you already have your GHRH picked out, let's say you pick tesamorelin for this conversation, then you go over to your GHRP to potentiate that, right? If you want kind of the cleanest, the most amount of muscle gain, fat loss, and the least amount of fluid retention, no side effects, you would go with an ipamorelin. So that's kind of choice number one. With the caveat, though, that if you have a need to increase hunger, GHRP 6 drives hunger like crazy. So with GHRP 2 and 6, though, you will get more of a pressure on prolactin, on edema, and on all those other potentially negative cascades. But if you're someone who needs prolactin, then that could be a good reason to bring in GHRP2 over IPAM. So that's kind of how we see it. But so far, if we're saying like the best combination, I'd probably go with a CJC 1295 without DAC and IPAM or a TACI and an IPAM. That's kind of the tried and true. That's what everyone recommends kind of for a good reason. But GHRP 2 and 6 still has its place. Now, hexarelin, again, it almost isn't even this category. It releases about as much growth hormone as about 4 to 6 IUs of exogenous growth hormone. And those numbers are very skewed, changed on the person. The problem is it desensitizes so quickly, that's the first bolus dose. And then from there, it becomes less and less effective. So it'll go from like an exogenous 4 to 6 IU of growth hormone chemical signaling potential strength to like 1 IU. Like it drops dramatically. So it's not a player you can use long term. So hexarelin to me, almost like I wouldn't even use it as a GHRP. It'd be the add-on, the tag-along to bring up a lagging body parts or to drive a little more fat loss, a little more recovery. But these other players, so let's say everything over here that's not hexarelin, all these players, those can be taken long-term, no days off, zero problems. If you're going supraphysiological, accumulating negative side effects, there's problems. But that's a dosage problem. It's not a duration problem. This is improving your endogenous natural production. It is not shutting down natural production. And to take it a step further, exogenous growth hormone does not cause natural suppression. It blunts it. So what we have there, I'm getting off track, but I got to talk about it because we're talking about it. So if we have exogenous growth hormone coming in, exogenous growth hormone is what? It is a 22 kilodalton variety of growth hormone, right? So 22 kilodalton variety. Our body naturally releases pulses, mainly at night, of a 22 and a 20 kilodalton growth hormone. In any kind of isoform ratio testing in WADA USADA, they're looking at these ratios. And yes, we have already had growth hormone products made in those specific ratios. Pretty cool. Not that really available, but either way. So our body releases this at night. It'll have this bolus, and then it'll slowly trickle out, and it'll push out some 17.5, some 5s, all these different kilodaltons, and all these other oligomers, heterodimers, homodimers, all of these other fractions and pieces and kilodalton varieties of growth hormone. So that's our natural production, okay? Mainly at night, but still happens throughout the day, obviously. Now, what people assume is that when you take exogenous growth hormone, 22 kilodalton, it abolishes this whole thing. What happens is there's a temporary blunting. So when you take your exogenous 22 kilodalton growth hormone, there'll be a suppression, rather a blunting for a couple hours, and then it re-kicks and restarts this process. And it'll recycle it. So say we initially abolish this for 1 to 3 hours, then it comes back around and endogenous production re-releases this. Because if you had only 22 kilodalton growth hormone in circulation, you would become acromegaly overnight. Acromegaly individuals release about it'd be equivalent to roughly 50 to 200 IUs of exogenous growth hormone per day, right? So if truly taking exogenous growth hormone caused that real natural suppression, you would literally become acromegaly, quote unquote, within like overnight, but really in a couple weeks. So that just doesn't happen, right? Does not happen. And they've had people go on growth hormone replacement therapy for years, come off, and full, complete natural cycling began and restarted within 24 hours. So full natural recovery after years of consistent exogenous growth hormone usage was recovered in 24 hours. So just to make sure we're understanding what's going on from a circadian aspect, right? So either way, that is kind of what we're talking about there. But going back to hexarelin. So hexarelin being so strong and so powerful, this is something that we would like to bring it in something like 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, if it's used for longevity, muscle building, and body composition purposes. If it's microdosed, 50 micrograms in order to drive a lot more cardiac changes, that can be done microdose before bed long-term, no problems. So differences in usage overall. But with a lot of these, with the growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides, I'm a big fan of starting off with 100 micrograms or so of each. So we would do 100 micrograms of CJC, no DAC, 100 micrograms of IPAM, sub-Q before bed, give it time and slowly work up by maybe 100 micrograms at a time. Of each, you go 100, 100, 200, 200, and we're not trying to see how high we can take that dose. What we're trying to do is see where we get the most amount of benefit at the lowest negative side effect profile and kind of the lowest dose. So really the minimum effective dose can elicit the maximum response that we need. Now, with these growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides, They are food dependent, meaning if you are having a bunch of food and not waiting 60, 90 minutes after a meal, then you will be blunting their effectiveness. Won't completely obliterate them, but they'll be blunted. Whereas exogenous growth hormone, you can eat that during the meal. Like literally, you could be eating a package of donuts. Take your growth hormone during those donuts. That's a bad example, but still, whatever. And you'll still get all of the action. So ideally, if we're trying to time your growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides, this is something where we're trying to do it like an hour or 90 minutes after meal before bed, or anytime throughout the day, or upon waking fasted, and maybe staying fasted for an extra hour to increase the lipolytic tail end effect of more fat loss. So you're starting off with 100 micrograms each. And we are going, I prefer sub-Q, and you could decide AM or PM based on your goal. If you need more fat loss, AM cascade. If you need everything else or anything else, before bed. That's going to drive more oligodendrogenesis, more neurological, soft tissue, muscular, more growth, more recovery, everything. So this is kind of the prime time. And then over time, you're working up the frequency. So you can go anywhere from 1 to 3 times per day. And as I said, there's no need to take the weekends off. Again, that was, it's funny. That originally started back in the day so we had Dat Be True, who came out with all the research on growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides. He basically figured out that, people that took these peptides at higher doses longer term every day got too many negative side effects. So he said, let's do the weekends off so you can pull down on fluid and then come back at hard Monday through Friday, because most people were training Monday through Friday, weekends off. So then that got spun. And the individual who stole this information from the guy said, desensitization occurs, or we're trying to, I forget what he said. It's basically like trying to make sure you're matching your natural pulse and giving your body a chance to relax and recover. It doesn't need recovery. If anything, you're missing 2 days of recovery because you're not improving your endogenous action. So whether you are taking those days off, it's doing nothing for your receptors. It's doing nothing because there's no desensitization problem with anything but hex. Hexerelin is the one where we are going to say it will desensitize the most. So that's kind of like the only one you really have to worry about. And then doses for that, again, you're starting lower, 100 micrograms, you can work up to like 500 micrograms. Even for these GHRHs and GHRPs, dosages are roughly the same, usually 100 to you could go all the way up to 1 milligram. Some people have taken 1 milligram of both morning, noon, and night with amazing results, but fluid retention does tick up. So now, going to the secretagogues. So first, let's do CJC with DAC. So the drug affinity complex addition extends and elongates the half-life by about 7 to 10 days. We don't care about the half-life per se. Look at the non-genomic and genomic effects. It literally causes growth hormone bleed. So it works very similarly to an MK-677. A little more sloppy though, meaning CJC with DAC, it can pack on a ton of muscle. It can cause a ton of fat loss, but tends to cause a lot of negative side effects. So it acts more like a traditional secretagogue that just pulse, 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 pulse all the time. And because it's happening so frequently, doesn't matter if somatostatin's high or low, it's actually going to indirectly blunt somatostatin's effects. So that's not a problem. And then it's going to obviously have so many pulses to where, let's say somatostatin peaked right now, DAC's going to release, CJC with DAC's going to release right after this, and 10 minutes after that, and an hour after that. And so it's never without having issues from there. So that's kind of where CJC with DAC is at. That's dosed upwards of 1 to 10 milligrams taken one time per week. You could dose it a bunch of different ways, but that is a higher dose compound. MK-677 is the one where it's acting more like a secretagogue, but this is happening from an enzymatic player. So this is happening, MK is working on this entire cascade, but it's hitting the enzymes involved in the hypophyseal portal system, in the anterior pituitary and the somatotropes, and in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus harder than any other growth hormone releasing hormone or peptide does. Because of that, if we had to pick one ultimate, I hate saying mass builder, that sounds so lame. If we had to pick one ultimate muscle building compound though, that's why MK is preferred for all of these. You see the highest IGF changes, the highest nitrogen retention changes. I can't take MK anymore because I just have so much nitrogen retention. I have a pump all day. And that sounds cool to certain people, but like typing at a computer, which is my job, I can't do it because my forearms get too pumped. And I got to take a break and like shake them out. So it literally works that well depending on the dose. But again, Because of that, it also has the highest negative side effect profile. So for this, and if you look at the research, they've done studies, and I've had people actually repeat this research for MK-677, where they've stayed on MK-677 for 1 to 3 years. I've had a couple people actually do this too, which is cool, because I've had clients for like 10 plus years. But even after 3 years, IGF levels never came down. They stayed elevated. There was no desensitization that occurred. We'd come off natural production, came right back on. They didn't lose any of their gains, which obviously you're building new nitrogenous structures and compounds. And so you're building more muscle tissue. But the people kept a moderate dosage. No one went above 25 milligrams. People were staying at 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 15, 20, 25. I'm not a fan of working up above that unless if you have to, but you will get more negative side effects as that work up. So if you find a dose that works for you, this could be something to just keep in low and slow long term because it works on the enzymes. You can also set this up throughout your week so that Monday through Friday, you're taking your growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides or your exogenous growth hormone, and on the weekends, you're driving the enzymatic factor. So not that you have to worry about desensitization, but you could literally set this up so that you're fixing every single aspect of growth hormone production without causing overexpression, which causes the negative side effects. So you could set it up this way, to where you have something like a Monday through Friday setup. We'll go 2 ways. We're gonna go weight 1, we're gonna say Tessa, and we're gonna have IPAM. And then weight 2 is going to be with exogenous growth hormone. And either way, then on the weekends, you would drop those. And for both of those, you would add in your MK-677, because again, this is a massive player on driving up the enzyme systems. Now, there is a time and a place in order to, you could technically use all these at one time. The problem with that is then you're trying to play catch up with the negative side effects. Because if you have all of these, if you have a GHRH, a GHRP, and a secretagogue like MK in play, and exogenous growth hormone in play, what happens? You now have 4 variables to figure out, which it becomes cumbersome and it might be overkill. I've had people had great success with that, but it's kind of overkill. So I would rather have GHRP and GHRH or exogenous growth hormone and then a secretagogue. Or you could kind of flip this and you could do something like Monday through Friday on this example. And we could do something like exogenous growth hormone then. And then on these weekends over here, we can bring in our actual Tessa and IPAM. And that's not for someone who needs to reset receptors, because that's not a thing. That is for someone who, if they take growth hormone for too long, regardless of the dose, they get too much edema, then we can pull off, still have endogenous stimulation, but let the edema kind of go. So instead of the 5 on, 2 off, it's 5 on, 2 on. That makes sense? So from a basic biological aspect, that's kind of what we're looking at with endogenous production, the basics of growth hormone releasing hormones, growth hormone releasing peptides. The last thing we're gonna talk about is MK-777. It's a newer compound, and I left it till the end because it's not gonna go anywhere. Meaning it was made by some underground labs. There is, to my knowledge, right now in 2026, there's 0 kinetic research on it. There's really no data on it at all. So we're left to look at what's happening in reality. What we're seeing in reality is people are seeing some pretty good results. They're not getting the same amount of hunger stimulation, not getting the same amount of deep sleep stimulation, which I didn't mention before, but MK could also be used to improve hunger and to improve REM and deep sleep. So it can also be microdosed 5 milligrams in order to improve sleep, or as the background player to improve hunger, because it will drive up hunger. So another reason why you may or may not want to use it. But 777 seems to act with less hunger, less improvements to sleep, pretty close to similar body composition changes, but not that drastically more. It's kind of being blown up online to also interact with serotonin receptors, and there's all these potential theories on how it's truly working. But looking at it mechanistically, what we're seeing in application, I'm just not really a fan yet. So I think until more research comes out, until more people are using it, I don't see the need to use it over like an MK-677. So sermorelin and MK are 2 things that I probably would not go with. I'd probably go with the other ones. And I'm hoping we do come out with a new secretagogue, right? I mean, MK-677 works amazingly well, but I feel like the growth hormone releasing hormone and peptide category, it's been the same for about 20 or 30 years. I think this side of technology and advancement needs to kind of be kicked up because it's such a big aspect of longevity, of recovery, of anabolism, of fat loss, of sleep, of health, like just of everything. And so I'm excited to see more developments over there. I'm trying to do some things myself. The problem is these work so well. So we're trying to complement different molecules to have less drivers on appetite, more drivers on collagen synthesis, more drivers on deep and REM sleep. And it's interesting, but that should be some new stuff coming out by the end of 2026, maybe early 2027 if things go well. So guys, that is a basic overall guide on endogenous growth hormone production, how to utilize growth hormone releasing hormones and peptides and secretagogues and MK, and the reality. I try to bring a lot of reality to these videos without drama, but with giving you guys the real world application and the real understanding of the science behind it. As always, thank you so much for watching. Check out thepepcoach.com. See you next time.